Good evening.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, it's so great to be back for another episode 34. Can you believe it? It's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah, we're trekking along.
Yeah, we are. So tonight we're going to be talking about building confidence in yourself. And I don't know about you, but I feel like this is a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. And I feel like the launching point for me being passionate about this episode is you have done some different podcasts, live videos and stuff along these lines. And I think that's really inspired me to just talk about it more. And I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I did a recent episode on my podcast about confidence. If you haven't checked out my podcast, shameless plug, check it out, the Matt King podcast on iTunes. But I think, a lot of us, we can only speak from our own experience, and that's kind of our perspective. And I've always felt that that's an area where I'm always struggling and trying to find that. How do you build that confidence?
Yeah.
And we could do a whole episode of where that comes from and why certain people seem to be more confident. And we're not going to talk about that a ton tonight, but that is definitely, I think, a subject that we're both passionate about, and hopefully we can give you guys some tools to help anybody out there who's struggling with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you want to just dive into it? All right, so the first thing we were talking about is directly dealing with something that you were talking about in the podcast episode, which is called the confidence loop. And it really has to do with when you're like building a new skill or wanting to like add in a new skill, even if you like already have a base of like, I can play this instrument, but I want to add in like this particular skill, right?
Yeah, skill or behavior. I mean, kind of some easy examples are a new sport or public speaking, or writing a book, something that you don't really have a lot of experience in. How can I become confident in that skill set? Is kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think those kind of things need to be kind of addressed. And so can you kind of walk us through what is the confidence loop?
Yeah, and I just kind of came up with that term. I don't think these are, certainly the concepts aren't my own or original, but I think the sequence is important and a good way for us a good paradigm for us to look at it at. It's a good, easy to remember, hopefully. And I think, why it's important is because especially when we're building a new skill, if we don't succeed originally, we can become very, we just either quit or we think, I'm not good at that automatically, or I'm not meant to do this. Right. And so that's why this kind of shows the progression of that. And the first step of that loop is to have the courage to do something, because that's like the hardest part, is to step out of your comfort zone and try something new that you want to do. There's a thing that you want to do, but you still are afraid to do it. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of that idea of, we've all been in a circle or a group setting where somebody says, ask for a volunteer to do something. And even in like church tonight in class, we're in a big auditorium, and the teacher asked a question that wasn't like an easy question. And you're in a group of 100 plus people and nobody wants to say anything.
Right, especially when Dr. Crispo is
especially
the teacher.
So like we all know that feeling of not wanting to look stupid or not wanting to appear like we don't know how to do something. And so the first step is you have to have the courage to do it. You have to step out of your comfort zone. And then so the next step then is becoming competent in that skill. And that just takes reps. I mean, and that's another point where a lot of people quit because they think, I'm not meant to do this, or I'm not good at it. And that's where I think we get lost in the mythology of the expert, or someone who just is a genius, or
just somehow leapt to that position.
Yeah, because then we see that person and we compare ourselves against them, and we think, I can't do that.
Right.
And the reality is, in a lot of cases, that those people either had an advantage or they put in a lot of reps behind the scenes that you don't know about. And they went down the same path that you need to go down. But a lot of us quit during that step. And so in order to build off that courage, we have to take that next step and put in the reps required if we are really, really want to do this. And then once we do that, then we obtain that confidence. Yeah. Because we know we can do it, we've proven we can do it, and then you have that built-in confidence in whatever skill set that is.
Yeah, I think that's just so critical. I think a lot of the time we have this like big dream, or we have this thing that we want to do, but then we get to the actual stepping out in faith and then doing the work. and we kind of back away because we somehow don't identify ourselves with those people who are successful, because we compare our situation to their situation and say, well, they must have had X and I don't have that. And sometimes, yes, like you said, there are advantages. But I was thinking and meditating on this the other day about like how comparison really steals so much. I mean, we call comparison, you know, the thief of joy. But even beyond that, like it just gets in the way of so much where we could really, like it's hard for us to reach our potential because we're sitting there comparing our situation. And it's kind of interesting. One time a teacher was telling me, was kind of instructing me in a lesson about playing like another musician. So he said, don't play like this other musician. Don't match every, you know, rubato, or don't match, you know, every little nuance musically and all this stuff, because then it's just a replica of what they've done. You know, be your own person. And so I think that's exactly what we need to do in building our confidence in ourselves. There's nobody else like me, or there's nobody else like you in that sense. And so it's okay for us to be in where we are and to continue to build to get to where we want to go.
Yeah.
And build those skills. And a lot of the time, it's like you said, it's the behind the scenes work that they've done, reps, hours, failure, so much that they put in sweat and blood and tears, you know, if you will, behind the scenes where nobody's been watching, what we like to say in our band, like the private victories where no one else was looking or applauding you or saying, way to go. And you're like, yes, you know?
Yeah, the private victories and the private pain that you've like you mentioned, you failed, you've lost, but you decided to keep going.
Right.
And that's where that competency is built, like that is most of the time behind the scenes. And that's what a lot of people aren't really willing to go through to get that confidence. Right. And that's, you know, we've talked about this before, but the idea of counting the cost. Are you really willing to do what it takes?
Right.
Because a lot of times we don't do the research to understand, am I really willing to give up, to sacrifice, to get to X? Is this really meaning something to me? And I think the dangerous part of that is if we don't do that work up front, then we get halfway and we quit and we say either it's not obtainable, or, you know, it just wasn't meant to be, and then we apply that to other areas and we don't go after anything anymore. And we really have to put in that work to understand really what it takes, because a lot of us think it's going to be easy or easier, and we aren't really willing to put in the reps to achieve a level of mastery in a certain subject or area.
So, I mean, you call it a loop. So after you go through those initial first two steps of having courage and then building your competency, the goal is to now have the confidence, and then to go back and do it again with various skills, or even picking up the ones that you already maybe built, but you need to pick them up again. And I was just thinking about this, kind of turning it around in my head, but why do you think we shy away from this loop so much in our world? I mean, I'm going to say in our culture, I don't know, but I feel like it's kind of popular, cool a lot of the time to kind of do this and be like, well, you know, it's all good. I can just quit this and it's not a big deal. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think a lot of it is because a lot of us get by with where we are. You know, we have the comfort, a lot of us have comforts and distractions outside of really going after something big or going after something that you're passionate about and making a big difference in your life. And if you quit, in a lot of cases, there's not going to be a significant repercussion. Right. You're still going to have your 9-to-5 most likely. You're still going to have a roof over your head most likely. You're still going to have your family and friends that support you and tell you it's okay that you quit. Right. And there's not really enough pain. You know, there's another saying about we don't really change until the pain of not changing is big enough. And so a lot of us don't have enough pain and therefore enough self-discipline to make these changes. Right. Because that courage, that initial step is a big hurdle. Right. And then even after you get over that hurdle, then getting competent enough before quitting is another big hurdle. Right. And a lot of us are probably too comfortable to make those sacrifices. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, what is that? There's like that saying or that research that talks about like how your brain wants to do as little as possible, you know, and it wants to get away. The least valuable, the path of least resistance. Yeah, for sure. And so that's where, we've talked about habits and putting in, there's something Gary Vee said recently kind of applies to this. He said that short-term pain is a huge leverage point. If you're willing to go through short-term pain, because so many people aren't willing to.
That's true.
Then you are going to you're using that as a lever to propel you forward, because a lot of people just aren't going to do it. And so regardless of what arena you take this in, you can really skyrocket if you're willing to go through that short-term pain.
Right. No, I think that's so true. I was thinking about that actually the other day, because I do bar method, and a big part of that is you do these sets, and I'm sure it's similar in other types of workout as well. I know that you do like sets and reps and all that stuff, but we do these sets of thigh work, and thigh work is my weakest point as far as like what I can get through. Like I can usually get through almost any other set, but thigh sets are my hardest. They're the most pain inducing, like they're just my most frustrating and whatever at this point. But I've been trying to think about like, how can I enjoy this more, and how can I lean into this more? And one thing I've been telling myself, because it's so much about a mind game, right, is this short-term, if you do this short-term pain, like if you have this short-term pain, you're going to be so thankful later. Like you're going to be so glad later, because the part that you feel the best afterward, like one of the reasons that bar method is awesome is because afterwards you feel amazing. And so usually a lot of that has to do, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that, but a big part of that usually is because you did a lot of thigh work. And so I like think about that, like how much better are you going to feel because you just took this extra 30 seconds and did these reps?
Yeah, no, I think, and a lot of, that's a great example, because anything like that where after you do something like that, whether it's exercise or it's a mental challenge or a difficult conversation, and you overcome, like when have you ever felt badly afterwards?
Right.
You don't. But if you, instead of having eaten the healthy meal and you eat the ice cream, you almost always feel guilty.
Yeah.
And yet there's something that it's very difficult for us to do that front end of, no, I'm going to be disciplined and not eat the ice cream.
Right.
We want that quick fix. We want that hit. And that is a very difficult thing to overcome. And that's why if you can train yourself and have the discipline to endure the short-term pain, then you're setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just think we can't do enough to continue to stretch ourselves. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think obviously you can go too far, but like there's so many things, there's so many ways that we live in our comfort zone right now that kind of is speaking to whatever the culture or whatever, that the more that we stretch ourselves, like the better we're going to feel. And it's sort of like you were saying, like usually there's not a negative consequence if you quit, but if you keep going, it's sort of like you're battling yourself and you're like, oh, but I've never done this before. And it's like, but what, you have so much to gain.
Right.
I don't know. Did you have something else to say about that? Okay, cool. So then the second thing that we were going to talk about, so that's kind of like the external, like building confidence in a skill sets, and in different like maybe even professions or whatever you want to say. There could be a million different applications, but then this next one is about internal confidence and building that. And Matt had this incredible live video that he did, was that Friday night, just before a date night, and he was talking about how it's not wise to negotiate your goals. And I was just wondering if you could kind of give us a snippet of that.
Yeah. Second plug, if you want to follow J. Matthew King, you can see that live video. The genesis of that was a quote from Jesse Itzler, who said, "Don't negotiate your goals." And like when I heard him say that and talk about it, like that really kind of blew my mind, because that's what we do. Like we negotiate against ourselves. We set out a goal, like I'm going to run a marathon, and then in order to do this, I have to run, let's say 5 miles a day. And then when it comes time to train, it's so easy for us to say, well, today I don't really have to, because I'm going to tomorrow. Right. And then, whatever. And then you keep negotiating down from yourself, because this is a goal of your own. There's nobody else. It's you.
Yes.
In your mind, this internal game. Nobody else is necessarily going to hold you accountable. And in so many cases, we negotiate against ourselves and negotiate against our goals. And it's such a dangerous precedent to set because, like I said, there's nobody that's necessarily going to stop you. There's nobody else that's going to impact necessarily except you.
Right.
But the problem with it is that we begin to lose confidence in ourselves, and we're essentially being hypocritical because we've said, I'm going to do X, and over time I stopped doing X and X and X, and so we have no trust in ourselves.
Right.
And then, even further down the road, eventually that's going to impact your other relationships, because if they see that you can't even trust yourself, then how are they going to trust you?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, one thing that you said in the video too was, if you had a friend who kept breaking their commitments, like you agreed to meet at a certain time to get coffee or something, and then they kept not showing up, like you're going to stop having confidence in that person, like being a part of your life and being a good friend and being reliable.
Yeah.
And you're doing the exact same thing with yourself. And I think one of the reasons this hits me so hard is because I've done this so many times with myself, and I'm sure I'm not alone, but it's so important that we keep those commitments to ourselves, because then in life, it's so much easier to me when I've done that with myself to be able to keep my commitments and to be able to specifically keep my commitments in setting boundaries or things that I know are going to help me be at my best, so I can be at my best for other people. And so I just think that this is just that cycle again, that, if you take care of your own stuff internally, that it's just going to have a ripple effect and continue to help those around you.
It's interesting because it's very dangerous how our mind works in this way. Not that our mind it doesn't work appropriately, but it's very interesting how our mind works, that it doesn't even have to be a bad thing. So let's take that example of trying to be healthy. Let's say that you went for a week and you didn't eat any sweets because you said you weren't going to. Well, then your mind says, you should reward yourself by eating some ice cream because you did so well. And so you're then you're still, even though it uses a good thing to trick you into breaking your word. And so I think maybe, do you have any tips for how, in that scenario where you have this goal with yourself, how do you make sure that you're honoring your word?
Yeah, I mean, I know we've talked about a couple of different things, like even like the negative side, like having a commitment, what is that, like site, where you can sign up and they'll give to like a cause that's like really terrible that you don't agree with or whatever. But I think, like, for example, in the case of eating, I think so often there are things that we just naturally fall into. Like for me, it's like like if food was like a comfort thing growing up, then it's like, oh, I should reward myself because that's comforting. And like having an ice cream or having some like a soda or whatever it is that you want to comfort yourself with, which is like the exact opposite of your goals. So I think what you can do in that moment is have things already that are going to be celebratory for you in those moments. Mm-hmm. So like small wins or big wins, have maybe a list of things like, okay, small wins for me are, I could do these things, and then big wins. And some examples are like, go for a walk at the park and take some time for yourself to be able to meditate, read a book, play with your kids, whatever it is that's going to be enjoyable for you. Or, it could be calling a friend, literally, especially right now. I think it's so important. You could use Marco Polo to do video chatting, or of course FaceTime or Skype or Zoom. I don't even think people are using Skype anymore, but, there's tons of different platforms. Being able to just have a time to talk with a friend can be really helpful, and like you feel so good usually afterwards. Having a workout, doing something that is like that you really enjoy. Maybe it's yoga, maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's something that you pay for, like getting massage or a pedicure or manicure, or maybe it's going and doing a shooting range or whatever it is that you like enjoy. But I think having those lists and already having like done the preparation, is going to set you up for success, so that when you come across those times of like, oh, like I've done so well this week, I deserve X, like then look at your list and be like, I deserve some time off, or I deserve to be able to have my husband take the kids for a couple minutes and I can go and get a little Starbucks or go to Target or whatever, and just have those things. Obviously you've got to do some work beforehand, but that kind of helps you to already have thought it through instead of feeling like at a moment of vulnerability and you're just slumping back into something that you would have normally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's something that we often don't do. Like, I know for me, there's been tons of times I haven't done that, or I just haven't thought of those things. Like in those moments, you're like, oh, well, ice cream is so comforting. Like that's what we did when we had a good grade or this or that, you know? And so you're just like, oh, well, I have it. It's, oh, on the way home, I'll just stop and get something, you know? And it's just easy to go down that same path in our brain. Again, path of least resistance.
Yeah.
So then the third one is how to project that confidence. So when we were discussing this, I was trying to think of a way to like say, it's sort of like, what's that? Fake it till you make it a little bit, except not. But there's a way that you can show up, let's say, that is exuding that confidence without you necessarily having to say, I have confidence, or, you know, or already have all the skills that you need or whatever, if that makes sense. Like externally showing up and presenting yourself in a way that is already going to show that confidence.
Yeah, I think, you know, how you show up in different situations is extremely important. And we've talked some about first impressions, especially if it's a situation where you're going into either a job interview or a social situation where you don't know people. You want to put your best foot forward. You want to project something. And, you know, whether we like to or not, like we're projecting an image to people, and we are wired to read first impressions, and those stick with us even after a long time, and maybe we even get to know the person in a different way, but that first impression usually still sticks. And so we need to work on how do we show up. And a lot of times, this deals with your body language, how you dress,
right.
How you speak, your eye contact, how you carry yourself. Do you fidget? Do you move? Do you bite your lip? Do you look down all the time? And confidence isn't arrogance. I think sometimes confidence, right. The word gets a bad rap, gets a bad name.
Totally agree.
Confidence isn't arrogance, isn't sticking your nose up. It's not being the center of attention. It's again, are you comfortable with who you are?
Exactly.
And holding that space? Can you hold the space around you?
Yes.
And be comfortable there, regardless of what somebody says, regardless of if somebody treats you weird or says something weird.
Right.
Are you still able to hold that space and be in control of your environment?
Yeah. So well put. There's somebody that I met that really had a big impression on me, and they didn't say a lot to me. They didn't really have to say a lot. It's just how they presented themselves. And of course their reputation preceded them as well, because I already knew who they were. But still, like how they presented themselves, they didn't need to be the center of attention. They didn't need somebody else's approval. They just already were themselves, and they held that space.
Yeah.
And, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask about, maybe, men and women may see this differently in some situations, and in some situations where you're just with all men or all women or a mixed company, maybe it comes across different ways. Again, like I said at the beginning, we only see our perspective. I can only see it from a man's perspective. But I do think, we read, what are the other people? How are they? Who is, you read what their appearance is. Are they confident in themselves? What's their goal in the situation? How have they dressed? How are they coming across? And I think, again, sometimes, as people of faith, sometimes we negate some of these things and think, well, that's not important how we look, because as long as my faith is X, Y, Z, and I have a good relationship with God and my spiritual life is great, then yes, those things are more important, but that doesn't mean these things are not important as well.
Right.
And we want to put our best foot forward and show that we are, we're competent people. We're confident people. We can take care of ourselves. We take pride in our appearance and how we show up. Those things are all things we need to be thinking about and working on.
Yeah, if we want to influence others for good, or if you want to influence others for bad, I guess the same applies. It's the way we show up is going to affect that. And so if we don't, like you said, dress or speak or go about things in a way that is helping people to show our sincerity and our not sincere, I already said that, focus, our dedication, our, I don't know, just seriousness about whatever it is, we have to already have thought about these things going forward. And I think that where men and women differ, at least from my perspective, is, oh, sorry, there's Dan. That women, for us, I think a huge thing can be, one thing is having something that we feel looks flattering on us is really, really important. I'm not saying it's not important for men, but I know for us, like sometimes it means something new, or sometimes it means something that is just maybe a little bit of a different look. And then also having our hair done and our makeup done and like feeling really good about those things, even if it takes a little extra time. Another thing is like often I know for me, and I've talked to other women who feel the same way, that how we come across is really important to us. And we don't want to come across in a way that is like an unintentional way. And this could run a gamut of things. And so for us, sometimes I think, and I, again, I'm speaking for myself as for the most part, is, you know, how we word things or how we even have like body language can be really, really critical in these kind of conversations or events or wherever we are. And so I think always maybe having some either lines of things that you know that are like good things to say, or conversation starters or things like that can be really helpful, even if it's like on a note card or something like that. I know for me that's just really helpful if I've already thought those kind of things through, or if you know who you're going to meet, like already knowing what things you're going to ask them, and then also you know, maybe taking the lead depending on who you're with, about, or maybe not taking the lead, I should say, depending on who you're with. You know, if you're with other women or if it's mixed company, I think it might look different as well. But I think your comfort in how you look and how you feel and where your mind's at is just gonna help you feel more confident going into a situation. And I think one thing, again, if you've done that internal work, that's just gonna project, because again, if somebody says something weird or throws you off or makes fun of you or something, it's easier to just kind of smooth it over and not be as big of a deal.
Yeah.
Do you have anything like male wise that you feel like would be a good distinction?
I mean, I think, I don't know about a distinction per se, but I think, you know, how you come across is extremely important. And I think a lot of my theory is, just like you talked about, it's important for women to dress a certain way. I think if somebody is dressed either in a way that doesn't look like they've put together their outfit very well, or it's a little out of place, or, you know, it just doesn't look put together, then that's also a sign that they don't feel very good about themselves and they're not in a great place. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, the other thing is, a lot of people, I think, don't feel comfortable with what to wear. And so a lot of people revert to what their fathers dressed, how their fathers dressed, or how they dressed up in high school, and, or, you know, wherever, another part of it is wherever somebody first had their independence, which is usually college.
Right.
Then that style sticks with them through life. And so a lot of people just haven't again, we've talked about putting in the time, preparing. Are you preparing to show up in these circumstances, whether it's not, another aspect is, you know, your body language. If you're somebody who struggles with, you know, not having eye contact, have you worked on that? You know, that's not magic, you know, it's a skill. If you're somebody who doesn't do a good job of conversation, have you worked on that, on listening and how to respond? Because people are going to judge you on how you show up, and their judgment might be unfair, but that doesn't take away from what is going to happen. And you're hurting yourself by not preparing for those opportunities and those relationships that you could have if you worked on some of these skills of becoming more confident and, like we said, holding your space. If you look like somebody who just shrivels up in on themselves, then people aren't going to take you seriously, even if you have a lot of great things to offer. Yeah. And so in a way, again, we've talked a lot about being a victim. That may not seem fair, but that's what it is. And so we have to work on these skills.
Yeah, something that I've been thinking a lot about, and I know we got to wrap this up, but you know, if you looked at yourself in the mirror and you saw, and you weren't you, so it was just this random person in the mirror, would you admire you? How would you judge you, etc.? And then maybe compare that to somebody who you do really admire. Again, not in a tearing down way, but in a, okay, what's the differences and how do I need to continue to elevate myself, not in a prideful way. Again, we said confidence isn't arrogance, but how can I continue to elevate what I'm bringing to the table as far as how I'm appearing, all the things that you just mentioned. I thought that was a great list. Then how can I continue to get to that level? And ultimately, would you want to follow you? Would you want to partner with you? You know, and if you wouldn't yet, then what kind of changes do you need to make to be closer to those people that you do follow and that you do sort of look up to and things like that, and aspire to be like? And so in that way, it can be a good thing to healthfully compare how can I continue to elevate my skills and what I'm bringing to the table, and how I'm preparing for these situations, because people may really miss out on something really great, you know?
Yeah, and I'm sure, look, again, we talk about what we know. I'm sure that I've missed out on many of these opportunities. And so that's why I think it's an important topic. And I like to say, again, this is another word that we struggle with, is pride. In my mind, you know, bad pride props you up to where I'm putting myself on a pedestal for others to see.
Right.
And positive pride pushes us forward towards our goals.
Yeah.
And so we have to, you know, be careful with these words and thinking, I can't be proud of myself. We should be proud of ourselves. We should be proud of who we are and who we're aspiring to be, and be aspirational, like you said. Who are these if I'm not there right now, who are these people that we can see to take some things from and become the best version of myself?
Exactly.
You know, I'm sure there's certain things that I have to work on that I've looked to other people to try to pull from their expertise. And, you know, that's just, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we need to be working towards if we want to be the best versions of who we can be.
Yeah, and ultimately, those people that are like on your board, as we've talked about before, are going to push you to be better all the time. Well, I think that's all that we have for tonight. Hopefully you guys got something out of that, and we just really feel passionate about talking about the subject. I feel like we could keep going on and on, but follow us on Instagram at No More Some Days with a Z, and subscribe and share our videos if you're watching on YouTube, No More Some Days. And we just really appreciate you guys listening tonight.
Thank you guys. Have a great week.